know what actually works in our business? Now, if I wanted to go all existential, I would say we never really know, but we can get closer to actually knowing things in our business if we take the opportunity to test things. I'm sure you guys are familiar with this concept, but the idea is basically when we have a question in our business, looking at data or creating experiments to collect data can be great ways for us to figure out what should we actually do, what works best. The most common form of testing, which is a good entry-level area for any of us who are getting into the world of testing and experiments in our business, is what people call an A/B test, also known as a single variate test or just a split test. These kinds of tests are a lot like what you might have learned back in science class when you were a little one, and they were talking about this idea of having a hypothesis and testing against it. A/B split tests are very similar. Basically, we want to take a situation, we want to divide ourselves into two groups, and we want to give one group the normal stuff, whatever that is. And for the other group, we want to give them the same normal stuff, but we want to change one thing. We want to change one variable. That's where the single variate name could come in. So our normal group, they receive all the normal stuff. The other group receives the normal stuff, but with one specific twist. And in these two different groups, what we're looking for is a difference in one specific measure, which we want to identify at the start of the experiment. For example, let's say we want to do an experiment around subject lines in emails. For one group, we're going to send an email newsletter, just plain newsletter with the subject line, hello. In the second group, we're going to send the exact same email with the exact same subject line, except we're going to make one change. In that second group, we are going to use an emoji in the subject line. And for these two groups, we're going to try to test and see, does having that emoji increase the amount of people who open the email? So the thing we're testing for is the impact of emojis in a subject line, and what we're looking at are, in this case, open rates of those emails. That's kind of a split test in a nutshell. Now, this is really just a dumbed down basic version of what split testing looks like. And yes, of course, you can have split tests that test for multiple things. That's where you get into multivariate testing. And yes, there is a whole statistical significance analysis you want to do for this process. It's more complicated than the way I just described here. But regardless of how you're doing these, whether you're going super scientific or just gut checks with a little bit of data to inform you, you need to figure out a place to keep track of all of this information. And that's what I want to talk about in this video. Because once you start testing, I think you're probably going to get addicted to it. I know we have here. Once you start testing one thing, you want to test another thing, and all of a sudden you've got all this data firing at you from all directions. You know whether subject lines with emojis are better. You know whether this color is better than that color. You know whether this font is better than that font. You've started to test so much. Now you have to remember it all. That brings me to this template. And in this tour, I want to show you around how this template helps me organize my split tests. And stay till the end because I'm going to talk about some quirks that you're going to want to keep in mind if you do use a structure like this. What we've done here is we've created a list in ClickUp. On that list, we have tasks which represent each test or each question we're trying to answer. Along that, we have some custom fields where we're tracking the information around each test. And actually, let me just go inside one of these tasks and I'll show you around. Inside this task, we're actually not using the task description at all at this point. Again, we have the task name, not representing a task, but actually just representing the test. And our custom fields down here help us define what this test is looking at. In this case, our control group, our normals, is that we're sending an email normally with our text-only subject line. Our experiment is we're going to send the same exact email, but with an emoji in the subject line. What we are looking for, our unit of measure to observe a difference, is the open rate. The test duration is automatically calculated based on the difference between the due date and the start date, which means we are reusing start date and due date to mean the start and end of the experiment. And we have a field here for result, where we can track whether or not the change, the thing we're testing for, improved or made things worse than what it was before. Right below here, which I'm going to expand here for you, is where we can track the results for each test if we want to put those directly in ClickUp. So for example, maybe our open rate on one was 28.2 and the other one was 31.5. Now, if we didn't want to be super scientific about it, we could look at these two numbers and say, oh, wow, our experiment did worse than our average result, than our normal benchmark. So we could say this result is worse. Now, quick aside here for the statisticians among us, or anyone who took a statistics class, I want to highlight that what I just did of looking at these two numbers and saying, oh, this is higher, so therefore this is worse, this isn't really the benchmark we want to achieve for good data. We actually would want to analyze these numbers and see if the difference between them was statistically significant, meaning is the difference big enough to really make a conclusion based on the sample size. But that's detail stuff. I will say just at this point, whether you want to just eyeball it like I did here, even though it's less accurate, it's easier, or if you want to go into another tool, do some quick calculations and confirm, either way, you want to put your result into this results summary. The reason we want to do this here is so that we have a quick eyeball frame of reference when we're looking at our test results to see how our past tests did so we can easily skim them. If you are someone who's a super data nerd, maybe you want to replace this result with something a little bit more quantitative rather than just solid, worse, better, same kind of answers. But speaking of test results, I think that takes us into our next view, which is right here. This is a table view in ClickUp where we have it grouped by the actual result custom field, which I showed you before. It's got these values. And again, you could replace this with something else if you don't like the dropdown. Next up, I want to go to the active tests view. This is going to show us any tasks, which means any tests that are in one of the active statuses. Oops, sorry, not that one, but these three here that are not in the idea stage. So any tests that we're actually working on, that's what's going to go here until we process those final results. Potential tests, which is the other view you see here to the right, is where we're going to track tasks that we're thinking about, but are still in that idea phase. The last view I want to highlight is over here to the right, and that is a task creation area. This is a form view in ClickUp, which you guys know by now I'm a big fan of. These form views can be filled out following the prompts with optional information if you want to, and these will populate and create new potential tasks inside your area. If you felt fancy, if you wanted to be fancy, you could even load a certain template onto here if you have a split testing process you want to apply. But that's how you can have all of these managed and easily created consistently from one form. I know a lot of people use ClickUp forms exclusively for clients or for outside stakeholders, but I just want to highlight here that using forms internally to make sure your tasks are created consistently, I feel like a lot of people overlook it. So for anyone who's a ClickUp user looking at this test results area, consider practicing this inside your own workspace. The last thing I want to say about this structure as I go inside and show you a task one more time is that even though I'm using the tool called ClickUp to organize my split test results here, you don't have to. This same exact structure could be applied in any other tool that allows you to have custom fields or columns and rows of data. So Excel, Asana, Coda, Monday, Notion, anything that you're using that allows you to have those things in there, this will work just the same way. I'm not using any fancy features here except for, I guess, one somewhat complicated formula here, which isn't even that complicated, and that's it. But the main value here is the ability to have all of this information in one place so you don't have to memorize it and just hope you can remember all of those lessons learned. The last thing we want is all of our lessons learned to just turn into lessons forgotten because we've never written them down or have them somewhere easy to reference. Now, before I go on and start talking about some tips for organizing your split tests and using this template, I want to give a quick reminder out there to all of our ProcessDriven members. If you are a member, this whole template can be installed into your account in just a few clicks. Just head into the membership, find the resource page for this template, and you can download it in just a few seconds. So if you are a member, there's your quick reminder. Otherwise, let's move on and talk about some pro tips regarding this structure. Whether you're building it out in ClickUp or something else, there are a few things you want to keep in mind. Number one, keep in mind that this template is made for comparing one result to another result. Two different things that you're comparing. This could be an A/B test, which is where you make one change between two otherwise identical things, or even an A/A test if you want to compare two subsets with no changes between them to make sure your subsets are solid. However, this will not work in this current structure for multivariate testing. You're going to need to expand this template, expand the structure if you're looking to change multiple things about your test scenario at one time. For most of us, though, that won't be an issue. The second thing I want you to keep in mind about this structure is that this is just a record, a recap of what happened. A lot of the actual testing, a lot of the actual analysis, if you are doing statistical significance checks, if you are doing sample size checks, all of this stuff, all of this analysis would need to be done elsewhere. This is for logging the results, not necessarily crunching the numbers in this tool itself. This is too basic for that at this stage. The good thing about this is, though, that many of us already have tools that have split testing built in. For example, almost every email marketing tool, quiz builder tool, funnel building tool always allows you to do split tests in their own platform. And for that reason, most of us don't have a need to track the actual hard numbers of a split test in our own area, which is why this template, being so simple, works. Rather than trying to do the math in this kind of template, you're taking the results of split tests you've done elsewhere and just throwing them all into one spot so you can review them in one place. So just a quick reminder, this is not where the testing is actually happening. This is where you're logging the results of the testing that you've done elsewhere. Now, last but not least, the third thing I want to remind you when it comes to this structure, particularly for those of you who are building this in ClickUp or you remember installing this into your ClickUp, using this kind of structure where you have your split tests right there, tracked where you're already tracking your other tasks or SOPs, what's nice about doing it this way and logging all of this in this central tool is you can now mention these results in things like your brand guide, your SOPs, your tasks, so that these results can be mentioned and interwoven into your daily process. For example, if you had your brand guide directly in ClickUp, you might have a rule that says you always use an emoji in a subject line, and you link to your split test as the reason for that rule. That's using an @ mention inside of ClickUp. Granted, you could also do this by just hyperlinking things, copying the links, and putting them in any other tool. But it is really convenient to have it all in one place, so it's all centralized in one search, and you don't have to just wrestle a bunch of hyperlinks. To summarize all of this information, I just want to say that if you are doing anything in your business, whether it's SOPs, processes, or things like organizing A/B split tests, what we always want to remember is that our memory is a liability. And if we want to make sure those lessons learned are not lessons forgotten, tracking the things we learn as we go is a great habit to get into so you and others on your team, maybe now or in the future, can learn from those mistakes. I hope this template tour was helpful for you. If you want to access this template, just a reminder that members can find the link in the description and non-members can become members to find this template by joining the ProcessDriven membership in the description below this video. Inside that membership, not only do we have 45 plus ClickUp templates, we also have a course for how to systemize your entire operation in ClickUp with or without templates, and showing you exactly how to make templates your own so that you don't even have to rely on templates we create. You learn the skills to actually create them on your own for the specific needs of your business. So if you want to learn more about ClickUp, Process, or anything in between, check out the description below. And until next time, enjoy the process.